When I had our marriage ceremony, I had absolutely no idea what was going on. I had just turned 3. Things changed when Berg would call for me. He wanted to be with me, and this was like cuddle time with grandpa, which was basically child abuse. 13, 14, 15-year-olds were having sex with adults. And yes, many kids were getting pregnant. Kids were having kids. I was born in the Philippines in the 80s in David Berg's household. David Berg was leader of the Children of God cult. In his household, he had sort of 3 chosen children, as it were, which was his 2 adopted children, my older sister, Davida. And then when my mom got pregnant with me, Berg decided that it would be a great idea to document a child's life from before their birth and sort of use me as an example of how to raise a child. So my life was heavily documented in a series of children's books called The Life with Grandpa. Berg was already known by that time of having extremely pedophilic views on raising children. My mother, Serena Kelley, had already written the Davidito book at that time, which was a full child book because Berg believed that children should be awakened as toddlers. He documented my mother's entire pregnancy, and actually the whole experience of my birth was written in a publications of the Children of God cult called Lifelines. And then once I came home, they continued to document my birth all the way up until I was about 4 or 5 years old, growing up, learning how to walk. So the entire Life with Grandpa series was a 5-series kind of kids comic book. I grew up walking around the house and there would be going on. There would be women doing tease videos around the house. There would be meetings where they would have inspiration and they would have children, 12, 13, 14 years old, and they would literally be dancing for the home and taking their clothes off, and adults would be cheering. So I was exposed to a lot of at a very, very early age. It was always terrifying to me because I knew at some point I would have to be doing the same things. I just didn't know when. So the Children of God started as the family, like peace and love and joy and anti-war. And that's what attracted most of its initial followers. And as more people joined and as the cult grew bigger, so did David Berg's power and his desire for power. He started with religious prostitution, which was women going out to clubs, going out to bars, going out to hotels, and having sex with men for money, and in return teaching them about Jesus and saving souls for the Lord. And a lot of these men would end up supporting the Children of God cult. On top of that, a lot of these women, because they were having unprotected with these random businessmen in cult communes all over the world, the women were becoming pregnant as well. So there was a huge influx of children in the 80s of women who were doing religious prostitution and who actually had families at home. So then when that became sort of the norm, that's when he went straight into child marriage, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And that's what happened to me when I was 3 years old. I was actually given to Berg by my mom to be married. He gave me a ring. We had a whole ceremony and everything. It was considered a huge honor. Everyone was so excited. This was the way that Berg was grooming. It was full grooming tactics to get the children used to being around activities. So then when you became 7, when you were 10, when you were 12, and you were actually told to have actual sex with adults, by that point, you're exposed to so much activity around you. In your mind, you're thinking, oh, okay, I guess this is just the next logical step and I should do this. When I had our marriage ceremony, I had absolutely no idea what was going on. I had just turned 3 and I had gotten this dress with puffy sleeves, and I had gotten a doll. And I remember that was like so special because you never got a lot of toys in the cult. I was just told to smile, do whatever grandpa tells me to do, and to just be there and like a good little cult kid and like, yay. I had no idea when Berg put me on his lap and he gave me a ring. I had no idea what was going on until he started explaining, like, this ring means you'll belong to me and you'll be mine forever, and telling me all these things. Again, I'm 3, so I'm kind of just like, what? And he did get a normal ring, which actually still fits on my little finger. That was my marriage ceremony when Berg would call for me. He wanted to be with me, and this was like cuddle time with Grandpa, which was basically childhood. A lot of it is done in secret in the beginning to make you think that you're the only one and to make you think it's normal. Later on, I found out that this ring was given to about 5 or 6 other girls, including his own adopted daughter. I was exposed to a lot more activity from the age of 3 and up, and then that's where a lot of this abuse and the memories of my younger life began. Berg will just request from the adults, like, I would like to see the girls dance for me in a video. Or he would request something from one of the adult women. I would love for like this woman to do a tease for me. And they had a whole filming area that was in the basement of this house, down in this courtyard. They just grab you, bring you somewhere and say, okay, you're going to be in this video. And we were told to dance for the camera and dance for Grandpa. You're in a basement, you're surrounded by darkness, there's bright lights on you, and you're told to dance. I just kind of froze up and I started crying, and what ended up happening is I got a punishment and I was beaten because I ruined the video for Grandpa. Many times I would walk close to the basement and see the bright lights on, and there was a woman doing a full tease, completely naked, men filming her and doing it for Grandpa. Berg would actually watch the videos and be like, oh, honey, you could use a little more, like, you should grow your hair longer. Or like, oh, that color doesn't suit you. Like, oh, you should move your body a little more this way and this way. The women would have to sit there and take it and be like, praise the Lord. Yes. Us kids, it was very much rooted in this abuse of it. So pull your pants down, expose your naked bottom to the home, whether it's 50 or 100 or 200 people. You would be spanked with a fly swatter, with a wooden board, with a ruler, with a spoon. And Berg used this phrase from the Bible called, foolishness is bound in the heart of the child, but the rod of correction will drive it far from him. Berg was like, see, we have to spank children with tools, like with a rod, with a fly swatter, with a shoe, with a ruler, with something, because it says so in the Bible. Now with adults, it was a lot more sinister. In particular with Berg, he was like, are you sorry? And they'd have to say, yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. Thank you for punishing me. And that's a lot of what happened to us kids as well. Full disassociation. But of course, we didn't join a cult, so we did not know any other way of life. My mother, Serena Kelley, she joined the cult very early on in Texas. She was actually going to UT Austin when she happened upon some Children of God members singing with their guitars, witnessing to people in the street, and she just up and left and never finished college. And she ended up going to Europe, where she was in charge of taking care of a bunch of babies because people started having babies in the 70s. She was actually known as a really good caretaker of children. She was very likable, and she actually got personally recommended to Berg, and then Berg ended up personally calling for her to come to his household to take care of his children, which was Davidito and Techi. Berg wanted my mom to abuse his adopted son, Davidito, starting at the age of 4. So my mom did whatever he asked her to do. Any type of child abuse, she was doing it, and not only doing it, they were writing about it, they were documenting it, they were taking photos of it, and then they put it in a book called The Story of Davidito. I ended up asking my mom about it many years later because I was trying to understand what was going through her head, and she just said she was doing whatever Berg wanted her to do because it made him happy. The same reason why she gave me away as a child bride at 3. My own mother gave me to a After that book, she actually was very revered, and because she did all of these things for Berg put her at a very high position in the cult as one of the top leaders. And then when we moved to Brazil, my mom became the top leader of South America. Cult loved to their children. Traveling with children was always done in the middle of the night so that nobody would know and could follow them and would know what was going on. When we moved from Philippines to Japan, I was woken up in the middle of the night. My stuff was already packed. We got into a car, we left and took a plane to Japan, and we ended up in Japan. And we lived there for about 2 years, where my mom was also getting trained into becoming a top leader. I was told, like, you cannot tell anyone you lived with grandpa. You can't tell anyone you're married, dear. You can't tell anyone that's your mom, that's your sister. You're just Serena. That's all you are. So a lot of times in Japan, I would just have to say, like, oh yeah, I came from the Philippines, and I was separated from my dad, and my dad ended up staying with Berg. So we would visit with him like once a month, and we would have to jump in a van, hide on the floor of the van, drive to this secret house, go see my dad for the weekend, then jump again in the van, hide in the van, and go back to the huge commune where we were living. We ended up going to a commune in Niterói, and we lived there for about 2 years because my mother was pregnant with my younger sister. And as soon as my younger sister was born, yet again, in the middle of the night, I was told, we have to move. The catalyst was always because some sort of family member from one of the families in the Children of God cult had found out where they were living and sent authorities to the commune to check on why all of these children were living in this house without their parents. This is how we were trapped. Whoever was signing the papers suddenly became the legal guardian. So you could pass kids off systematically to whoever needed to travel with them with all of these copies of power of attorneys that were previously notarized and signed by the parents, and then you would just need to sign it away to whatever adult was traveling with children at the time. And that's how Jeremy, Spencer, and Dora ended up taking care of me from then on out. After my mom had my younger sister, she never raised us again. We were separated. She became a top leader. I ended up seeing her only like once a year, sometimes once every other year. Jeremy Spencer, he was known as Uncle Jerry, because remember, we had to call everybody uncle and auntie, and Dora was known as Auntie Julie. So they were like, Uncle Jerry and Auntie Julie are now your parents. Whatever they say goes, because they're your parents and you need to listen to them and you need to obey. And that became my new life. I ended up moving to the mountains outside of Rio in Petropolis, and it was all children of top leaders of the cult. The whole time, as soon as I left Berg's house, I was constantly told, people are looking at you. You're special. You need to set an example. You need to be good. You can't say this. You can't do that. And so they built this whole other persona of me, of Serena, that was different from the other Serena. I'm 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old dealing with this. So fully ending up having to have this like split personality and just learning how to lie, to where lying and making up stories just became second nature to me. Berg was constantly telling the cult, Jesus is coming back. He's coming back in the clouds, and he's going to whisk us all to heaven. We are the chosen ones. So if Jesus is coming back in, 10 years, what's the point of having an education? What's the point of going to school? Like, let's just get these kids out on the road. Let's just get these kids begging on the streets and singing on the streets because we need money. We have a bunch of kids. We need to win souls for Jesus. That was the whole thing. Like, we need to win as many souls for Jesus so we can get all the stars in our crown, so we can be whisked up into the sky for heaven and rewarded on high and live happily ever after in the sky. And every time those years passed and Jesus was not coming to take us up in the sky, he would say, oh, we're doing such a good job spreading Jesus's love that Jesus is giving us more time on this earth. I didn't learn anything past like a maybe middle school. I grew up only learning how to read and write very well because we had to in order to be brainwashed. And the rest of the stuff, they were like, a lot of times you were either told to take care of kids watch kids younger than you or work in the kitchen. I actually asked to work in the kitchen because I just wanted people to leave me alone. I didn't want to work with screaming kids. And I especially didn't like that the adults were telling us kids to spank the other children because like we got spanked. So like now we had to spank the other kids. And that really made me uncomfortable. So I ended up being able to work in the kitchen. You had to peel like 500 potatoes. Okay, that's fine. Or sort through rotten vegetables, cook huge pots of spaghetti. When I finally was old enough to beg on the streets or to sing on the streets with the other kids, we'd have to walk around to tables after singing and try to sell CDs. So we had a little spiel in Portuguese of how to sell the CDs, or going down stoplights, literally begging on the streets at stoplights with buckets, asking the Brazilian people for donations. That's how I ended up learning how to speak Portuguese. So yeah, every single thing that was done to us was systematically done to separate us and to keep us in the cult, to keep us reliant on the cult to where we couldn't have any contact with the outside world. And that's also why they encouraged all the women to keep having babies, because as soon as you have children and you're in this cult, like now you're stuck in the cult and you're reliant on the cult, you're reliant on people helping you. Women are 22, 23 years old with already 3 children, and you didn't have any support, you didn't have any money, and a lot of times you didn't even have your own passport. Berg had this idea of being a wild woman for Jesus. You know, we talked about the new bottles, and he wanted all the women to have long hair and all the girls to wear dresses and skirts and flowing tops. A lot of women would walk around wearing sarongs that they could easily open up and just like, expose their whole body, you know, to the cult, because you had to be a willing vessel for Jesus all the time. Many times adults would have movie nights in the cult, and many times they would encourage the women to take their tops off and to watch the movie topless. Just because you had that type of control over women. I was always very, very skinny. My are tiny. I've had the same size since I was 12 years old. They just have not grown. Because I was very thin and I had tiny, I was teased and shamed and told that I looked like a boy and I wasn't pretty and I wasn't desirable to men. I was like, okay, if no boys like me and I'm skinny and I'm ugly, I might as well just look like a boy and be like a boy. So I just became a tomboy. So I ended up cutting my hair, wearing baggy clothes. And the second you cut your hair, that's just a big no-no in the cult. But in a way, also doing that, it did protect me from a lot more abuse in the cult from the adult men and the older teenage boys. If you did not fit into the good beauty standards, they would literally have a shelf. When you were going into your dining room, people would put plates on the 3-tiered shelf, and the bottom shelf was called mini, the middle shelf was normal, and the top shelf was maxi. The adults would just arbitrarily say, you're a mini, you're a maxi, oh, you're normal, you're beautiful, you're good. So if you're normal, you just took food from the middle shelf, the normal shelf. If you were a mini like me, you would take food from the mini shelf and they would have more carbs in it, so usually like more rice. And they would force us to eat that food to try to fatten us up so we would look more like womanly. And on the other side, if you were already heavy set, you would take food from the maxi shelf, which was less food than all the other shelves. And then Berg had these disgusting rules where he would say, if you're going pee, you can only use 1 sheet of toilet paper. And if you're pooping, you can only have 2 sheets of toilet paper. And that's it. But then Berg was like a big germaphobe, like you had to wash your hands really well, and you had to shower every day, and you had to look clean, you had to look presentable, because all the women and all the girls always had to look good for the men, because that was our job, of course, you know, to look good for the men so that the men would want us. And if the men didn't want us, then, you know, you were absolutely useless. Later on in the late 80s, because there was so much attention on the Children of God cult and it was becoming known for they stopped the child marriage and the interaction with the adults. So this meant 10 to 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds were having sex with adults. And yes, many kids were getting pregnant around 12, 13 years old and having babies when they were 14, 15. Kids were having kids. The rules started changing in the late 80s because Berg was like, first of all, you know, there's so much attention on him. The authorities were constantly after him. So he tried to do his first rebrand. No adults can have with kids anymore. Jesus has told me, you know, suddenly there's a new rule, like no more adults, and he made this whole thing like the system didn't understand. We, the chosen ones, know that it's okay, but because of the system and the outside world and all the demons out there, like we have to just play the rules and change the rules a little bit. So he changed it. But of course, once you open the door to that sort of child, it's not like it's going away because one day it's not allowed. I was living around 15, 16-year-olds and up into 18-year-old that were still having sex with adult men. So it was just done more in secret. After Berg died, that's when suddenly they were like, oh, well, Berg's dead, so there's no more secrets with him. So now that he's dead, you can say you knew Berg and that you're married here and you grew up with him. And I went from being like this secretive child to all of a sudden like going to another commune and everyone's like, oh, it's Mary Dear. Kids would come up and with their Life with Grandpas or shirts or their other cult publications and be like, can you sign this for me? And like, can you write me a note and say it's from Mary Dear? The cult really wanted me to stay as like a good example for all the other children. Little did they know I was like already planning my escape and just waiting to turn 18. A lot of kids from the first generation, the generation of the 70s, were already leaving, including Ricky and my older sister, and they were both writing me, trying to get me to leave as well. I got the adults to drive me to the bus station. I took a bus up from Mexico City to Houston, and then that's when I decided to leave the cult. And I immediately got a job as a receptionist in a massage parlor and making friends and realizing life out here is like really not that bad. And I made some friends, thankfully, there who had already left. And I ended up staying on the couch of a friend and trying to figure out how to build a life. Like I needed to get a car. I needed to find a place to live. I didn't even know what a bank account was. So I had to open a bank account. I didn't know what a credit card was. I didn't know any of these things because I was never taught. And on top of that, I didn't exist. And people were just kind of looking at you like, where did you come from? Little things that people take for granted every day were like crazy ideas for me. Like I can eat ice cream and I can watch whatever movie I want, like crazy stuff. I went crazy watching movies and reading books, like as much books as I wanted. The initial thoughts were just like, oh, I was lied to my whole life. You can still have a beautiful life even though terrible things have happened to you. I don't choose to focus on the fact that my mom gave me to a at 3 years old and he was 68 and I married him. I don't wake up thinking of all the terrible things that have happened to me. I wake up so grateful that I speak 3 languages, that I've been to 42 countries, that I've lived in 10 countries long term, that I have an amazing worldview and I have so much more empathy and understanding for others in different situations and in different cultures because of the way that I grew up. And that's what I hope people can take away. And that's what I hope people will learn from their own healing process. And also taking your power back from you to where you're not reactive and you don't have to get triggered by something your terrible parents said. The point of healing is that you have all the tools and you have all the things needed to bring yourself back down into homeostasis so that if you see a trigger happening, you know what to do. You have the resources, you know who to call, you know who to talk to.